Know, O Prince, that between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis and the gleaming cities, and the years of the rise of the sons of Arius, there was an age undreamed of when shining kingdoms lay spread across the world like blue mantles beneath the stars.
Nemedia, Ophir, Brithunia, Hyboria, Zamora, with its dark-haired woman and towers of spider-haunted mystery. Zingara, with its chivalry, Koth, that bordered on the pastoral lands of Shem.
Hyrcania, whose riders wore steel and silk and gold. But the proudest kingdom of the world was Aqualonia, reigning supreme in the dreaming west.
Hither came Conan, the Cimmerian, black-haired, sullen-eyed, sword in hand.
A thief. A reaver.
A slayer.
With gigantic melancholy. And gigantic mirth.
To tread the jeweled thrones of the earth under his sandaled feet. Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
As promised, since we've reached 1,000 subs, here is our podcast review of Conan the Barbarian movie. This is easily one of the best movies out there. This movie has it all. Action, romance, Arnold, James Earl Jones. All it's missing is Jeremy Irons. If only Irons was in it. But alas, it could not have everything.
We could have also used Christopher Lee.
Yeah, that's true. But this movie feels like a Shakespearean drama. And James Earl Jones, the way he acts in it, makes it feel like one.
Apparently, this was one of his favorite movies he ever made, if not the favorite.
It's not hard to see why. Apparently, he felt that this was the most Shakespearean thing he had ever done. Roger Ebert complained about an Austrian killing a black guy at the end of the movie.
I understand why he complained like that, but I'm gonna say that I don't think it was a matter of purposely casting. Given the 1940s politics, I don't think that's what Milius was thinking, or the studio. They had Arnold before they cast James Earl Jones, and Jones himself mentioned once how friendly him and Arnold were with each other. So it was obviously not at the forefront of the actors' minds. The only person with the right to complain in this situation is Jones, and apparently he did not. So I'm not sure I'm going to agree with the point fully that Ebert is making, although I do understand where he's coming from. One thing before we start, if you want our scene-by-scene review of this movie, go check out our live stream with World of Conan. We did a shot-for-shot kind of live stream analysis. Just be aware, I was monstrously ill during this stream. This is going to be more of a short-form podcast form. But anyways, the movie starts off with Friedrich Nietzsche, quote, "What doesn't destroy you makes you stronger."
We also get Mako doing his speech of, "When the oceans drank Atlantis," which just adds to the appeal of the film. And we get the family forging, the family sword scene, which really feels almost like a birth scene between father and mother, where they're birthing not only Conan, but the sword that's an extension of Conan in a way, and of the family. There's a lot to be thematically read into this scene. In a way, they're forging the man Conan will later be. And they engrave runes into the sword. That goes without saying. And then, after that, the father tells the enigma of steel to Conan. That Crom is his god, and that Crom dwells below the earth. And that when the earth was young, there was a great battle fought, and a great many men were slaughtered. But that the gods lost the riddle of steel. But Crom remembers it.
And expects that men should discover the answer to the riddle on the battlefield.
This scene is very iconic. It's great. To be honest, I don't really like the idea of headcanon, but I love the idea of this having been something that Conan's dad did tell him after forging Conan's first sword. I would love that to be actual canon.
But enough about father and sons bonding together. Let's get to the destruction of their village and their entire tribe. You know, fun stuff. With the scene that follows,
It feels like an opera, as you have the Great Riders of Doom song that plays out. And what follows is a massacre, but it feels like a Wagner opera. And John Milius wanted to do an opera, but instead he ended up getting a movie. But he decided that he would adapt the movie as though it were an opera. Like a kind of Russian, German style opera was the best way to approach Conan's lore. Conan the Barbarian just does such a great job with this scene. The father, now initially the men of the village are not doing great, but then Conan's dad rallies them and they start to do a great job fighting. But then he's mortally wounded by an axe to the back. He is then set upon by dogs, seek to tear him apart as he lays all but dying. You noted that Conan's mom did not hide this sight from her son. It kind of feels like she's almost doing a look, son, and remember. Avenge your father. It almost feels like that, even as she's shielding her son behind her.
As if there's an aspect of that that's connected to the riddle of steel, and she understands the world's not a kind place.
And my son must avenge my beloved husband.
I can't be babying him. He
Now-
must be strong, especially after the destruction of the village.
And of his father, because he was a daddy's boy. And it feels like his mom is kind of trying to engrave into her son's mind here as well. This is a very chilling scene. She's then hypnotized by Thulsa Doom, who steals the sword that is rightfully Conan's.
and ends her with it.
Immediately you can tell that Conan is fairly traumatized, and he was hypnotized briefly as well. Even as he's grief-stricken and dragged off, note the Nordic runestone in the middle of the village, which is a really cool touch. Apparently John Milius also wanted to do a Norse saga, the Song of the Volsungs, which is basically the story of Sigmundur. I suspect would have been the story he would have wanted to tell, either that or Sigurdur. But instead he got Conan. I'm not saying he didn't want to do this movie. He obviously did, and he was very enthusiastic. But there's a lot of stuff he wanted to do, but he decided to condense it all into this movie and put it together, which he did such a fantastic job.
Conan ends up being a slave and goes on to become a gladiator. And there's a quote when Conan gets all PC on us and says that the best things in life are to see your enemies driven before you and hear the lamentation of their women, which is just such a great quote. And it's in this movie and it's so hilarious. I crack this joke just because, wow! The actual quote is taken from Genghis Khan, I believe, so it's an actual Mongol quote, which is really, really interesting. The only real problem with the beginning of the movie is how Conan has his freedom given to him when he should have claimed it by steel for himself. So that is a creative decision I disagree with, though it doesn't mean that the whole movie is bad.
But he races off into the wilderness, pursued by dogs. In my opinion, a nod to what happened to his dad. Except where his dad died, Conan does gain his freedom, but he falls into a pit where he finds
a funerary hall where there's a figure sitting on a throne.
Seizing a sword, he smashes it back into shape and shakes off the rust that lies upon it. Okay, this is more a mythological thing than anything else. He then thanks Crom.
Really, he's praying to Crom too often. He's gonna get a lot of dooms. And boy, does he ever get a lot of dooms.
Fights off the dogs and turns them into pelts. Wow. Or rather than dogs, I should say wolves. And demands information from Subutai, a Hyrcanian, who is chained to a wall to die to local wolves because he's a thief. Wow, imagine what they would have done to Aladdin. Conan frees him. Conan and him discuss theology, with Subutai claiming that his god is the four winds, and they are to be found everywhere, with Conan explaining the theology of Crom. Later, they end up finding a city looking for info on Thulsa Doom.
Conan humorously punches a camel, and the two of them meet a woman called Valeria, who really doesn't feel like Valeria from Howard's stories.
They combine several of the love interests from Yasmina, I think it is, Baalit, and Valeria all together into one. She then ends up giving them a rope, and they slip into a serpent hall, where there's a lot of serpent symbols. Conan and Subutai steal a lot of stuff. Then Conan ends up killing the giant serpent, and the two end up kind of caught, but end up escaping. And the three end up partying it up for a while, for a long time. And then they're caught and dragged before King Osric, the usurper, who usurped the local throne. And he also apparently came from Samaria and came south seeking his fortune, but managed to claim a throne.
Thematically, he's going for the same steps in life as Conan himself ends up doing, according to these movies.
Sumerian, raider, usurper, but then he ends up finding something that he loves more than gold and booty and women, family. He comes to love his children. Osric's best friend apparently was slain by the man's own son, who did it in the name of Thulsa Doom and his snake cult, the cult of Set, so that Osric mourns for his friend, but ends up mourning more than that for his own lost daughter, who was a princess, but she chose to become a lady of the night, so to speak, and slave for Thulsa Doom, with Osric unable to understand. And it is hard to understand why his daughter she had all the riches of the earth laid before her, but she instead chose to become a lady of the night and a slave to Thulsa Doom, which it is hard to understand why a wealthy girl would do this. There are women who've done this in today's world, daughters of wealthy CEOs and successful men who have done this. So it's, I think, also Milius combining a few biblical themes with the prodigal son, so to speak, mixed in there. Namely, in this case, the prodigal daughter. Now, in the deleted scene, Osric is
Done away with.
but as he's referenced as still being alive at the end of the movie, he's still alive. And so the quest becomes to restore to Osric his lost daughter, whom he will forgive because he's a daddy. And Valeria suggests that they just take because they were given half the pay now, half the pay later. Valeria says, okay, whatever, let's cut and run. I ain't doing this. When in the actual Howardian stories, Valeria would have been the one going, let's go for it. Gold and glory. And Conan does not agree with this philosophy and sets out, leaving in the middle of the night, leaving a little token for her, a token of his love, departs and makes his way across many lands, getting directions from many people, including a certain sorcerer, who he asks to send flowers and pays to send flowers to Valeria, thus providing a trail. And he knocks out a priest, takes his robes, and disguises himself as a KKK member. I had to throw that joke in there.
Yes, because seriously, the costumes of...
Look like one. And like all the KKK, they worship a big black guy. This is making a lot of sense so far. I had to throw all these jokes in. Conan ends up kind of screwing up and getting caught. And that's where we'll leave you till next time, because we had to cut this video in half. So we'll continue our review in part 2. So don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Conan smashing his enemies to itty bitty pieces.